Hi weaving friends, you know that I'm always looking for ways to empower rigid heddle weavers to do more yourself and to have that kind of success independently. Well, I've just been warping my rigid heddle loom and I've got maybe another way that might help some of you to warp independently if you're having some issues trying to do it by yourself and some frustrations. Let's have a look at what I've been doing. Okay, so you can see here that I've got my loom clamped to one side of the table. On the other side, I've got two direct warping pegs to divide my warp up, which I always recommend if you have a wider warp. This warp is almost a full width on my 24-inch rigid heddle loom. So I'll always divide my warp at least in two if I'm doing almost a full width. So I'm at the point of being ready to roll on my warp, but now I've got a problem, and I know a lot of you have this problem as well. You have this big wide warp. It's not that long, this warp, that's not the problem, it's more the width. How am I going to handle all of this width and all of this bulk on my own and be able to tension it properly going behind the loom, trying to keep things right in front of the loom? Okay, so I've got something else for you to try. Okay, for this next step of actually taking these warp loops off the direct pegs, you are going to need either something like a spare heddle, if you just happen to have one. I know a lot of you don't though. So something like a spare pickup stick can also work. I'm going to show you both so that we can have a look. Now, I'm just going to bring that heddle in, and as I take this first lot of warp off the loop, I'm just going to pop my heddle through there. And then when I do my other side, I'll do the same thing. So I'll slip it up, I'm going to keep the loop, keep that nice and open, and slip that heddle in there. So now the warp is secured on the loom. And by the way, I just want to say this because I get this comment a lot. A lot of people think once you have these warp loops off the pegs that you can't let them go, you can't let them sit there under no tension. That's just not true. You can absolutely let them go. So don't worry about doing that for a moment while you're organizing other things. Now I need to move these warping pegs, but I'm going to reuse these clamps. These are called spring clamps usually. They're just like fairly heavy duty clamps. I use these a lot. So I'm going to just have a look at my warp and just spread it out a little bit the way that it's spread out on the actual heddle that it's threaded through so far. I've just got the slots threaded so far. Okay, so to an approximate width, don't have to be exact. And then I'm going to lay that down flat so that it's a little bit tensioned. See how that's springy? It's not really tight, it's just springy. And then I'm going to clamp one side to the table and the other side. Just like that. So that's the step for now. Let's have a look at if you were using a pickup stick instead of a heddle. I'm just going to do the same thing, going through those loops. Okay, so don't worry about the heddle at the moment. We're going to move that, but I'm going to leave the pickup stick in place. And of course, if you were just doing the pickup stick, if that was all that you had, you'd just do that first step that I showed you of taking the loops off the pegs first, popping them through. And then you've got this flat pickup stick and you're just evening out the threads a little bit to the approximate width that they are in the heddle on the actual loom. Then we can just pop that down and hold it, and then I'm going to put my clamps on, and you can either put your clamp on the pickup stick like that, or you can put it on the other side like so, just to really make sure that that stick's not going to go anywhere. Okay, so now they're both clamped and my warp is under that springy tension. So now I'll go to the back of the loom for the next step. Okay, next step. The loom is clamped to the table behind. So the first thing I'm going to do is take off that clamp. That's what's holding the loom in place at the moment. You see if I let go that it slides a little bit because I have it tensioned now at the other end. So I'm just going to hold on to it so that it's under good tension. And as I hold it, I'm going to start to roll. I want to do my first rotation, then I'm going to pop some paper in there as a separator. But for the first rotation, I'm just going to get that done first. Now, as I start to rotate, you'll see that the loom starts going that way towards the pickup stick that I've got clamped. That's exactly what we want. You want it slowly to start moving forward. And so it's rolling on, but it's tensioned and it's even. So it's almost like you've got someone holding the warp for you on a stick at the other end, but you've just got clamps. By the way, if you're worried about the clamps not doing a good enough job, you can always put more clamps on than that. No problem with that at all, if you happen to have them. Okay, that's my one full rotation. I'm just going to let that go for a minute because I'm not so tensioned that the loom's going to zoom off on me. And I need to grab my paper for the next part so that I can start separating that warp. Now, I don't have a paper that is actually wide enough, so I'm going to combine two pieces, just in case you're wondering why I'm putting two in instead of one. It's fine to do that and just overlap them a little bit. Just be patient putting them in because it can be a little bit finicky. Okay, so now I've got some paper in. I'm ready to keep going with the process. So I'm just going to be holding onto the bottom bar of the loom. That is where I'm tensioning from at the moment because I've still got those clamps holding for me at the other end. So I'm going to start to wind on again. And now I've got my paper to deal with as well. So I'm paying attention to that, but see how doing it this way, having it clamped at the other end, it's freed me up to just stand here and wind on and to pay attention to my paper at the same time and see everything that's happening here. That allows me to put on a better warp. So off we go again. Okay, I want to stop occasionally and give my paper a little tug. Make sure that that's getting tensioned nicely as I go, and then carry on. If you watch my videos a lot, then this might remind you of another method that I've used, and that is warping from the stand. It's a similar idea that you have the warp clamped somewhere, but you have the loom on a stand and you move the loom on the stand towards the end of the warp, which is exactly what we're doing here, but we're doing it without a stand. I'll link that video down below if you haven't seen that one. It's a really good one for people with a stand. All right, so at this point, you want to have a look at the end of your warp. And then if you've got any twists or tangles at the end, then this is a good time to just have a look and sort it out a little bit, because the warp's just being held for you there and you have the freedom to just come in and rearrange threads if you need to. Twisted threads aren't going to be a huge deal at the end of your warp, but if everything's under the same tension, then that is much more ideal. So I'm just coming through, I'm seeing some twisted threads up here, and I can just finger comb them out. And then make sure they're okay at the bottom. If you've got some twists that are right at the pickup stick, or the heddle if you're using a heddle, don't worry too much about that because these ends are going to be cut and you'll be able to figure those twists out. As I said, it's just if it's causing any differences in the tension. You want all these threads to be under approximately the same amount of tension, and that's going to help you out a lot. Okay, that looks good to me, so I'm going to go back to, I'm going to have to go to the side of the loom now because I'm getting so far across the table that I can't reach. Okay, so if I stand right at the end of the table, I'm sort of leaning forward now to try and reach the loom. So it's going to be easier for me to just come to the side. And for that reason, it's handy if you're doing this to be near the edge of a table rather than right in the middle of it, because otherwise you'll find yourself reaching a lot. Depends on the width and length of your table too. Okay, pull on my paper and continue on. So I can keep going until I'm pretty close. About there is probably the limit. Okay, so then I can come around here and release my clamps. Now, where we're at the moment, I would generally roll on a little bit more than that because that's a bit more warp than I need. I'm going to be tying directly onto this apron bar, and the apron bar is way up here when I extend it out. So I only need a little bit more beyond that apron bar, but not this much. So that means I'm going to just roll on a little more warp to finish off with. Now, because I'm closer to the end of the warp now, I can actually hold this stick myself if I want to, while standing at the side of the loom. The loom is moving now because I don't have it clamped anymore. And that's about it. I don't really want to go any further for my warp than that. I can set that down for a moment, and then I can grab my scissors and cut those ends. Don't pull on those and have a heap of tension when you're cutting them because they might ping back and then you'll lose your threading. Or if you prefer, you can just grab the whole lot. If you don't want to waste time mucking around there, grab the whole lot off and give them a snip that way. And there we go. Now I'm all ready to go on with my next step, which is my threading. So there you have it, friends. What do you think? Are you going to try this method of warping? There are so many ways that you can do this, and I think it's worth trying every possible way you can think of, so to help you settle on a way that's going to suit you best. I certainly find that a very simple and easy way to warp. I do have a lot more videos on this channel all about warping the rigid heddle loom, tensioning, so much stuff, I can't even go into it. And then I also have an online beginners class called Woe to Go Rigid Heddle Weaving, and that class has gotten so many new rigid heddle weavers going, and also people who have been perhaps weaving for a little while but are feeling a little bit frustrated with it and not knowing why, what's going wrong. I really recommend that class to you. I'll also leave the link for that down below. Well, that's it from me today, folks. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for all your support. And until next time, happy weaving.